Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City. Oh boy, do I have a lot to say about this movie. I'm gonna have a spoiler section later in the video because I feel like I can't really say everything I want to without spoiling it that much. So there will be a warning for that. My initial thoughts were that it wasn't going to live up to the expectations, and I was unfortunately kinda right. Especially considering the movie was a combination of the first two games, even though the second game takes place months after the first. I think I have a decent bit of knowledge when it comes to some of the Resident Evil games, but I'm by no means an encyclopedia when it comes to the series. But even then, there were a few things that were amiss that I'll talk about in the spoilers section. While I didn't have a problem with the casting of the characters, it just felt like some of the characters were butchered, especially Leon, but I'll get to that later. It was nice to see some recognizable characters from the games, but there's also a few that were missing that I would like to have seen, or some that I would like to have seen expanded upon. Then there's the plot. While not too bad, felt a bit jumbled, or there were some moments that didn't make sense, at least not to me. Most of the stuff I will go into a bit more in the spoilers section. The Spencer Mansion and RPD, the two main locations from their adapted source material, make an appearance in the movie, but I wish they could have been expanded upon more. The Spencer Mansion in particular. I also wish there were some more scenes or extended moments with some of the other characters, especially considering the film is under 2 hours. I know for the Resident Evil games you get awarded a better rank for going fast, but it seemed like the stories progressed too fast to the point of skipping half of the events of both the games. I mean, it was nice to see characters interact that you never would have seen otherwise, but I don't think it's worth it if you have to end up cutting some of the characters to avoid the movie from being too overcrowded. I did appreciate that the movie also drew inspiration from the remakes of Resident Evil 1 and 2, especially with the appearance of Lisa Trevor, who only appeared in the remake of Resident Evil, being absent from the original, or showing the truck driver that crashes in the RE2 remake. I didn't really think it was a bad movie, I was just kinda disappointed with how it turned out. Now I'm going to start talking a little more in depth about some of the stuff that may be considered spoilers, so be warned. First off, I want to say Leon's character was completely useless most of the movie. Whether he's being berated or sleeping half of his screen time, it seemed like he always needed constant saving. Then the scene with Ben, when he easily gets his gun stolen from him, leaving Claire to rescue Leon from getting attacked by a zombie. Ben's death in this didn't make sense either. He took Leon's gun, which we can assume was loaded considering how Leon reacted when it was stolen. Why would he not shoot the zombie that's locked behind the bars with him? I know it's not realistic to assume people make the best decision at all times, but it didn't seem like he even tried, almost letting the zombie just kill him without a fight. Going back to when I said the plot moved on for the sake of it, the truck driver, whose screen time can assumedly be attributed to inspiration from the Resident Evil 2 remake, gives Claire a ride so she can meet up with her brother Chris. So they end up hitting a zombie, just like in the game. But oddly enough, the zombie still seems to have some awareness or something, because Claire ends up having a stare down with her after finding her in the nearby forest. However, in the movie, the truck driver has a dog with him who licks the pile of blood that the zombie left, with the dog biting the truck driver and infecting him. What I didn't get about this was the fact that the infected driver was able to drive for miles, up until finally crashing in front of the RPD, which seemed like convenience. Unless the zombified truck driver still had some sort of awareness like the zombie that causes infection. But why crash in front of the RPD? It seemed to me like things just happened because they needed to cover plot points from the games. After crashing, his corpse ends up getting lit on fire from the explosion, and he even gets close to attacking Leon, who's napping at the reception desk in the main hall of the RPD, only being saved by Chief Irons, who then tries to leave the city to survive the outbreak, telling Leon he's in charge. That is, until he has to go back to the RPD because Umbrella has the city exits blocked off. With those gripes aside, I actually didn't mind the story too much. I think my problem with the story is the way the events were executed, rather than what was executed. I just wish it was a bit longer, so all the characters could have more screen time, or that there could have been a few more added scenes that added to the story. I also wish that some form of tyrant could have appeared in this movie. I could understand the Tyrant from the first game not appearing to avoid two Tyrants in one movie, but Mr. X making some sort of surprise in the movie could have been pretty cool to see. Unless it was planned and just scrapped because of Birkin and Wesker being the two main villains in this movie, to avoid already overcrowding the decent sized cast of characters. I wish instead of just mashing the two games together to make this movie, that they were just kept separate in order to develop some of the characters more. Especially since they end up omitting some of the characters like Rebecca from the first game and Marvin from the second. To me, it would have actually made more sense to combine Resident Evil 2 and 3, since those actually share more similarities in setting and timing than Resident Evil 1 and 2 do. While the story wasn't amazing, it wasn't completely awful. While they did have some concepts I thought were cool, like some of the RE1 and RE2 cast interacting with each other, I didn't like that important relationships were essentially removed. Unlike the first game where Jill spends some time with Barry in the mansion, in the movie she's with Wesker. For the RE2 side of things, you don't really get to see Leon and Ada's relationship, or Claire and Sherry developing the mother-daughter kind of bond as we do in the games. With Sherry barely being a presence in this movie, and frankly Ada being absent from the movie until after the end credits where she revives Wesker. I think they were shoved to the side in favor of the William Birkin and Chris Redfield relation that the movie tried going for. While it was a decent movie, I feel like Welcome to Raccoon City could have been a bit more, which is why I was disappointed. It's still pretty memorable though, so it has that going for it. I just don't know if it's for most of the right reasons. Again, considering the short runtime, I would have liked to see more of the RPD in Spencer Mansion, because I feel like there's a lot more they could have done with that, and expand upon the characters more. There are also several moments that are pretty nice nods to the game, such as the reference to the Jill sandwich meme, or the scene when Claire is going through the computer files and stumbles upon the files for the Ashford twins as a reference to Code Veronica, as well as the iconic first zombie sighting in the Spencer Mansion. I also think Wesker opening the body bag at the end of the movie is a nod to the opening sequence in the Resident Evil Remake, where a zombie peeks out of the body bag only to get shot. With Welcome to Raccoon City, there appears to be an effort in there to make a story. I just think that 1 and 2 should have been separate films to allow for the characters to develop more. Especially seems like the story for the movie tries to essentially speedrun the stories for Resident Evil 1 and 2. Even if you played the game, some of the characters and their motivations are a bit different from their movie counterparts. I think some of it comes down to expecting that the movie would adopt the storylines for the first two games in a unique way, rather than making their own story with elements for the first two games, if that makes sense. Much like how Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 2's remakes have a fair bit of differences in comparison to the originals, but they still resemble their source material. While the movie combining the storylines from the first two games makes it an entirely new beast, I think. Who knows, maybe in the next film, which is supposedly based around Resident Evil 4, this approach will make more sense. I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say for this video. Thanks for watching.